with telling us a little bit about your history. You started off way back then, and then you joined with Ocean Basket, Mozambique. Tell us a little bit about your long run in franchising.
Well, you said it, 1996 is where I first had the introduction to franchising. It was quite new to me. And it was a learning curve in terms of understanding that there's certain processes, systems in place, etc., and that you've got somebody that you have to answer to. Difficult in the beginning, but it actually started making sense because you had people that understood what was going on and helped you with a lot of the issues. The progress from there after I had left the Black Steer franchise is I was approached by my cousin, who was one of the founding members of Ocean Basket, to join the group. And I joined the group as an operator in the Rosebank store. And from there, I was asked to join the head office. And that's when Fats and myself got together and we did the collaboration together with Steers Holdings at the time to develop the franchise. And we set up, we had set up, I think it was 4 stores. And after we had set up the 4 stores, the decision was made that Steers Holding was going to buy the actual brand completely. And that's when we walked away from the Fisherways brand. And I then joined head office at Ocean Basket and ran the operations for the group. And that was probably the best time of my career in terms of learnings, and ran the operations division for the group.
Right.
I think we had, I think it was in the region of about 18 to 20 stores. A lot of them were actually company owned. There was a decision to take a lot of them and run them as company. And there were a few that were franchised. That was probably the most interesting and most exciting part of the whole thing in terms of developing new systems, putting everything in place and understanding what franchising actually meant from a head office perspective. And during that period, a lot of research. I did a lot of research and I tried to understand franchising, learning from the likes of McDonald's and all the big US franchises to understand what type of systems were in place to be able to assist franchisees be successful. The big decision was made to actually convert all of the company-owned stores into franchise shops. So we sold them off at a nominal price.
All of them.
That's right. And that's where the success started developing in the process. We managed to grow internationally, which was the next learning curve in our development and in our growth. And that was understanding the international market, the international laws, what requirements were from the different countries in terms of labor. And that was the next exciting venture. And at that stage, I was fortunate enough to have been made CEO of the group. So we were just entrenching the franchise in terms of its support and entrenching it in terms of its reputation within the industry, and also making sure that we had a successful brand that could grow for the next 30, 40 years. And from there, it was 2014, I made the decision to leave. And from there, I was approached by 1 or 2 other franchise groups to assist them with some of their growth strategies. One of the groups was the Fournews group, which owned News Cafe and Sol Souvlaki, and there were a couple of others that they had under their little umbrella. I was there for a little bit to assist with that, and then I was approached by Mozambique to run the business from Benoni, the head office. And that was my next challenge, and quite an exciting one too. Lovely brand, Took it from 8 stores to 24 in the 2.5-year period that I was there. And then decided that it's time for me to start my own little brand. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years. And I've been developing the Pasta Barra brand, which has been a little treasure of mine, taking all the learnings and understandings that I have developed over the years in the restaurant and franchising business to develop a concept that I could grow on my own. And that's I've done together with my brother. And we've got our first store open up in Pretoria, and we are looking at doing our expansion next year. So when taking a look at the restaurant industry over the years and looking at the developments and how difficult it started becoming in terms of profitability, I looked at all the things regarding the model, and I thought to myself, well, what are the particular points that seem to be a little bit weak, that need a little bit of thinning? And how do we develop a model that will hit the line figures that we all look for, that we used to have back in the early 2000s? And I mean, in those days, I remember that our bottom lines used to be between 18 and 22% of turnover, which was a beautiful figure to have when running this type of business. But with a lot of things that have developed over the years, things started becoming expensive, amongst other, your electricity, your labor costs, the cost of product, etc. So I put together a little concept that is catering for the upper market. It has a unique food offering, although it's very simple and flavorful. The setup cost has been in the ballpark that allows for a better return on investment over a shorter period of time. And the model is a more controllable one in terms of size. So, where we were opening up stores of 150, 250 seats, we've created a model here that actually seats a maximum of 65. So putting them all together, thank God, the last year and a half that we've been open, we've managed to achieve the bottom line. Yes. And we've managed to achieve those bottom percentages that was initially hoping for, which varies between 18.5% and 21.5%. And that's what I would like to share with the rest of the market. So in terms of growth, we are not going to expand the brand into a 100-store franchise. It'll be a little bit more niched. So we're looking at probably about 15 within the country. And then we've got a beautiful opportunity to be able to expand internationally when we are ready to do so.
Right. And
that's about it.
Wow. And I mean, based on your learnings and the challenges that you've overcome, over the years in franchising, what would you say would be, your key 2 challenges that you've come across in your years of franchising?
In the beginning, I think the franchisor almost has this perception that it's all about him growing his business and making money out of it because he wants to expand with lots of branches. But it's probably one of the big mistakes you can make when you're starting a franchise business, because if you are not of the opinion or understanding that the franchisee needs to make money first, then you won't be able to succeed. And I know that there's been unfortunately, a number of franchises in the country, and I'm sure internationally as well, that you have these guys that try and grow as many franchises as possible so they can try and expand their business quickly, and forget that the infrastructure and the support structure that is required to maintain and sustain them is probably the most difficult, the most costly part. If you have the understanding and that your initial phase of setting up a franchise takes time, costs money, and is going to put you on the back foot initially, financially, till you're established and have successful franchises. Then you're never going to succeed in it. And I think that was probably the biggest learnings that I had, especially with growing the franchise with Ocean Basket, because we had to try and see at which point of the curve and the growth we started making money, because it almost felt like we weren't accumulating wealth for the company, because we were spending so much money on infrastructure, support, etc. But it was probably the best thing that we could have done. Because by making sure that the support was there, making sure that we had enough people on the field, making sure that we could supply them with their products, making sure that we could maintain the standards, etc., then we would never have been as successful as we were during that period.
Yes.
The success of any franchise is the success of its franchisees. The more money they're making, the better you are in terms of a brand. And I think that's where a lot of contentment comes in with the franchisees, because they know that their bottom lines are there and they're making money that you promised them. And the big thing is also that come in is obviously with growth and the size of any franchise, the bigger you become, there's other complications that arise with it. And it's learning how to handle them, especially when you're talking multi-owner franchisees. That also becomes its own challenge. And we being in the game, we understand the E curve within the franchise industry, which is still applicable and still valid today, and how to work together. And that for me is the biggest reason and prominent reason for success.
Franchisees aren't as available as they were before. I'm finding that franchisors are struggling to find good franchisees. So they're opting more for the multi-unit ownership path. What are your views on it, in your experience, on taking on multi-unit franchisees?
Ilona, I've seen quite a change in the industry, and I'm talking in particular the restaurant industry. To find franchisees that are willing to invest the amount of money required to open up a restaurant, to work the hours that they are required to work to run this type of business, and to have the return on investments that are currently being made is a very difficult ask. Less and less people are prepared to invest their time and effort into this type of business because of that. So as a result, you'll see from a lot of the bigger franchises, you'll notice that there are a lot of multiple owners. So what is happening is that you're probably finding that there are more investors prepared to invest in the industry, as long as they don't have to be there, but they've got the right people to be able to operate them. So that model has changed. In the old days, we say we want franchise-owned franchisees.
Yes.
They had to be themselves. They developed the relationships with the customers, et cetera, which is very true. But unfortunately, that doesn't apply anymore. So the shift in terms of the restaurant industry on franchising is really being really tight on your systems and working with a program and the franchisee that will allow him to understand what operational skills are required and on how to be able to bring in the numbers that are required from an investor's point of view. So now you're starting to talk a different language. Now all of a sudden you need to have PR skills that you're going to be teaching your staff. You're going to be able to understand, let them understand what hospitality means. It's about getting the right person involved in the business. As an owner-operator in the old days, if the guy wasn't able to do anything, you do it yourself, and it was okay. Whereas there's been a big shift in that. And I also find that the different generation that is coming through in the industry at the moment is also very different.
Very
that
different.
Poses its own little challenges. A lot of people are very scared to work long hours. They're most entitled They feel like they're earning a lot more money for the type of work that they're putting in. And that's also created its own challenges. I actually had a conversation with a very good friend of mine who has a huge consultancy firm, and he deals with some of the larger corporations, and he says that this is the problem that they're facing everywhere. So for them, it's about trying to understand what we have to change to be able to get the job done at the end of the day.
Yes.
But on the franchising side, the multiple owned franchisee is the future. So perfecting the model on training, understanding the business, and rewarding is where it's at, and they're going to make the change moving forward in the industry.
It's very interesting what you're saying, because it almost echoes what I was speaking to a few CEOs of different restaurant groups, and they echo the exact same sentiment as what you're saying now, is that people to invest the money, Gen Zs who don't want to work full day, they don't want to put that sweat in the business. It's kind of remote, I'll do things here and there. And, it really has become an issue. And I think we need to tackle that issue head on. And like you say, develop the systems, develop the training, the tools by which to cope with this new unfolding challenge in the industry.
Yeah, and 100% agree.
And systems are so important now. If you're not going to have your owner-operator getting their hands dirty, you need to have very, very strong systems on board to allow for a manager, say, to run each outlet. What has your experience been with evolving systems and innovation over time?
The training of the old and the training of the new has also become different. There was a lot of basic training done in the past, and that basic training is something that can be picked up quite quickly today, because you have a lot of exposure to training facilities. You have a lot of exposure to training courses online, etc., which a lot of people are getting used to. So the YouTube training and all that has been something that has been instilled in the younger generation for the last 6-7 years. So they're pretty used to that, and they pick up quite quickly. The training now that is required is EQ training. It's understanding human behavior. It's understanding how to be able to adapt to the industry that you're in. And I think that's where the changes are coming. And I think that it's probably the most challenging, because if you look at myself, from the older generation, used to doing certain ways,
ourselves,
trying to understand how the new generation is thinking, that to me is the biggest challenge. So to be able to work together with the younger generation, understanding their mentality, their way of thinking, and putting a course based on that is where we're going to get success. I think the unfortunate thing with the way that the younger generation is also thinking in terms of a work-life balance, in terms of being able to have enough time to go and do my socializing, etc., means that we have to readjust our staffing to be able to accommodate the timelines required from each individual. So it could have its own impact in terms of cost, but it's what we're going to have to do to be able to get the success that we require to be, to have the operation running correctly.
Yeah. And it's again finding that ideal person, because if it's not going to be the franchisee running each of the outlets and you're going to have manager run stores, how are we going to incentivize those people? The KFC has it. All of their stores are basically multi-unit and they're successful. But there needs to be the right formula put in place to have a franchisee who's not just completely a silent partner, but is somehow invested in the business. That is going to be a major challenge facing us.
I think that that challenge is very real, and I think what we have to do with the franchisee now is not just about understanding the numbers of the game, it's about understanding how we deal with people. And
Yeah.
the people skills franchisee is probably going to become the most important thing moving forward. Because to understand the numbers and to be able to say, yes, my business is operating correctly is one thing. To be able to ensure that the staff running your operation are doing it effectively is the next thing. And,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
we used to, in the old days, train and operate a manager, and I still know many of them that used to work with us as youngsters back in those days, and that are still operating and have become shareholders in the game. And that's been their future.
Right.
So they've been with us for 15, 20 years. Whereas today, that doesn't necessarily apply. Today, they also want to say, well, you know what, I'm tired of this now. It's time for me to try something else. And they move on.
Yeah.
So that poses
Yeah.
it's a challenge itself.
Yeah. We're not playing by those old
So
rules anymore.
No, not at all. So good systems in place for training, understanding how human behavior works on the new generation, and making sure that we have that in place is probably the most important thing moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you're saying is so important. I was speaking to another CEO of a huge franchise group, and he was saying, like you're saying, in the beginning, we were looking for individual franchisees. Now we're looking for many CEOs to be a franchisee who has multiple units underneath them. They need to be able to run a business like a CEO. And that profile has changed completely.
It's completely right. I think we've also got to take the other into consideration. You know, the bottom lines are good for anybody who wants to get involved in the industry and become a multiple owner and an investor at the end of the day. But you've got to start making this business look more attractive to the younger generation. And how do you do that? Because if you're not making it attractive to them, we're not going to be able to get people to be able to run the business. And I think that we have a large portion of the market in South Africa that are willing to learn, but don't have the necessary skills to be able to do it. And I think that's something that, as franchisors, we can get involved in, especially in the different industries. And I think that if we could get some of the franchisors in each industry to get together to be able to develop, give them the necessary tools, skills into their positions, I think that's also going to assist us all at the end of the day, because you have, unfortunately, still a lot of uneducated people that need jobs that are willing to make their sacrifice and are willing to put in the hours like the old days, but they don't have the skills. They don't have the skill set. They don't have the communication skills. They can't speak the language properly. And I think that is where we can transform things.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And it really is a transformative approach. And it's something that franchisors can bandy together and offer that kind of resource. And I think it's almost an obligation of franchisors, our older generation, to be able to offer something like that to the unskilled workforce coming through.
100%. You know, funny enough, I was doing a training session with some of my crew here the other day, and I thought, what do I train them on? How do I better their skills? Apart from the normal, you know, serving skills and how to speak to a customer, etc. It's actually to give and boost their own confidence. It's about teaching them about communication and teaching them how to communicate with the different types of cultures. Because it's one thing talking to an Afrikaans client, it's another thing talking to an American client, it's another thing talking to a South African black client. But different approaches, different ways of discussing things with them, and it comes across very differently. So if we understand those methods, that makes a huge impact on the actual service itself and the way the customer feels at the end of the day. And that was one of the things that I was trying to teach them, various communication skills from some of the gurus all over the world. And it makes a huge impact.
Yeah. And these are the kind of things that you can only learn as you go along, and you learn the ropes, like you have been seasoned in the industry. And they're the subtleties and the soft skills, like you mentioned, that are so key now. more so than even the hard skills and operational stuff, which one can get a hang of. But these are the soft skills, the things, the nuances that people do not understand.
Correct. Correct. You're 100% right. And I think the challenge for me is extremely exciting, because it's about understanding what do we need to change. Because today's environment is all about change. Everything changes quickly. And if we can't adapt ourselves literally on a daily basis, we're going to fall behind. And that to me is a critical part of the investment that we need to make with franchisees and the staff.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying. And I can see that you're applying all these learnings into the new business model that you've developed, which is so great. And I'd love people to be able to learn these lessons from you. So even a little mini series of lessons in leadership, perhaps we can do with a few CEOs of franchise groups, and create a kind of a repository for future franchisees to tap into.
Good idea. I like that idea. Definitely worth a look at.
Manny, before I let you go, any other leadership tips or advice you would give to aspiring franchisees or franchisors looking to enter the industry?
For franchisors, understand it's a long road. It is not one that happens immediately. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and I think what new franchisors also need to understand is that you need to feed off the industry that you're in and feed off the people that are the experts in the industry to be able to gain the knowledge and the understanding of what the requirements are. Nothing is easy. It doesn't just happen. And at the end of the day, you don't want to destroy what you've started, and you don't want to destroy the future of a lot of people that are getting involved in your business.
Yes.
On the franchisee side, for me, it's about really understanding the game you're going into, and have a passion for it. Because if you're going into a game that you actually don't have an understanding and a passion for, there's a very slim chance of succeeding. And it's do your research, get involved.
Both sides. Get
involved in the business. Literally work your hands, get in with the blood, sweat, and tears, so that you can understand when it's going to be challenging and what you need to do.
100%. And the fact that you've also started your pilot operations and your operations are working well now is also a very key success factor for franchisors to get things right before you offer it to third parties, like you're doing so now.
Correct. And it doesn't happen overnight. Literally, this brand has taken us, we're now sitting on year 3. First 2 years was just about research, developing service touch points, developing menu, developing all of those things, and then eventually finding the correct site to be able to launch the brand. So,
and the site, of course. Yes.
It wasn't a 2-month operation to get it going.
And that's a big learning in itself. Manny, when are you ready to bring franchisees on board to become Pasta Barra franchisees?
We are literally, I'm busy finalizing my ops manual. I'm finalizing all the documentation to be able to give potential franchisees. And once I have got all of that in place and I have earmarked my first 2 sites, that's when I'll be ready. So we are hoping to be ready March, April next year.
Excellent. And I can't think of a better, more seasoned franchisor than you to join a group with, Manny. So I know there's tons we can talk about, and you've got such a wealth of information to share, but I'm not going to keep you much longer. Just to say thank you for joining the Franchise Mastermind podcast. It's been wonderful having you on board. And we hope to hear more from you. And I certainly will be.
And I hope
It's wonderful. Same here. Thanks again, Manny, and all the very best. Thanks for sharing all of those. Thanks, Manny. All the best. Cheers. Thanks for joining us, guys. Bye.